We are taking a visit to a place called Harry's house. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Cory.
And this week, we will be discussing the one and only Harry Styles and his album from this past year, Harry's House. This is one that is kind of by popular demand. It's come up a few times over the course of the time that we've done this podcast. Well, it's kind of inevitable because I feel like Harry Styles has been everywhere this past year. There's been no escaping him. He was in 2 films, sold out tour that keeps getting reported on in the news, and an inescapable blockbuster hit. It's been the year of Harry. He's been everywhere. And even though he could ruffle some feathers, he doesn't because he seems like such a nice guy, I think.
I mean, and on top of that, he got the album nod. Whether anybody's a fan of that or not, album of the year, it's almost inevitable that we had to talk about it. And I'm glad that it fell right into this pocket of what we're doing right now.
Yes, I agree. I think first we have to kind of start from the beginning with this before we get to the Grammys and this album's success itself. And really, this begins with COVID-19. That seems to be a theme with albums this decade so far. That's what it begins with. And it was supposed to be different for Harry Styles. He was supposed to go on a big tour in 2020 in support of the Fine Line album, but that didn't happen. And it got postponed and became this tour. So he couldn't do anything. And this is somebody who was always used to working. And he even stated in his interview, like, I really had to look within myself and started processing some things from the past that I hadn't dealt with before. Because when he was in One Direction, he was on a tight schedule. There was an album and tour every year.
And in my opinion, the machine drives those boy bands. So people were telling him what to sing or telling them what to sing. And there might not have been. I could be wrong on that, but usually in those situations, there's not that much creative control as far as what you're doing and the quickness that you're doing it in.
There's not a lot of it at all. And I looked into it. He didn't even get to write much with the band. His credits were pretty limited on the albums. And so he's really been writing a lot. And he just looked deeper into himself than he ever had before. And out of it came this album, Harry's House. He worked with his 2 producers from the previous albums, Tyler Johnson and Kid Harpoon. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. He'd had success with them before, especially with Fine Line. And automatically, there was going to be anticipation for what he did next because of the success of Fine Line and the number 1 hit off of it, Watermelon Sugar. There was just anticipation for what's he going to do next? And I mean, as soon as the era began, this blew up. This As It Was single, it just blew up. It was all anybody could talk about online. It took over TikTok. And the anticipation for the album was really high. And sure enough, until Midnights was released, this was the highest debut of the year.
Wow.
So only Midnights was able to beat this one. That's pretty impressive. And he's gone on an incredibly successful tour of many residencies, selling out night after night at arenas. So he's been pretty inescapable and unstoppable, and the tour's still going. It's not going to end until the summer. It's over in the US, but he's still got a lot of dates to go, and it just seems to be, it's Harry's world, and we're living in it.
And, speaking of Harry's world and what we were talking about before with being stuck in for COVID, we heard it out of Beyonce's mouth, a quote unquote, where she was like, I was stuck in there and I needed an escape. I didn't see anything come straight out of Harry's mouth as far as that specifically. But do you think, this is just a thought that I've had while we were just going through this, do you think that cover is reminiscent of him being alone in the house, and maybe even so the title as far as the COVID inspiration goes?
I don't think so. So for what he said, the idea of this album is to show kind of that home is where the heart is, because he's a traveling rock star.
Okay.
And home is what you make it. I think that was his main concept going into this album. Not that this is a concept album by any means. I don't think it is at all.
No.
But that was kind of his idea of it. It's like, this is my home. This is my space. He was saying that home is a state of mind rather than a physical place.
Heard.
And that makes sense. He has more than one home because he's loaded. Must be nice.
But that's a cool thought. I like that. That's a neat thought to bring together an album on top of, especially. Well, we'll talk about it as we go through, like I always say, but that introspectiveness that we get, and you saying that he was dealing with stuff he hadn't dealt with before. Wow, do we feel it on this album?
Oh, yeah, we definitely do. And it's also a sonic evolution. And he made that clear in the interviews, too. He said, this was the time I decided I'm not going to listen to anybody else. I'm not influenced by anybody. I'm going to see what I can come up with. He mentioned listening to classical music rather than the artists that he so fervently shouted out during his previous two eras. He made no mistake about who his influences are. He was very clear about it, and he gave them all the props, but this time he said, no, I'm going to see what I can do. And it's a very different sound. This isn't quite the straight up 70s influenced rock that we were hearing on the previous two albums. He went for something different. He said a lot of it was influenced by Japanese city pop, which not a genre I'm familiar with, but the American equivalent of it is yacht rock. And I don't think this necessarily sounds like it, but I can see that. And the title, Harry's House, comes from the album Hosanno House by Japanese musician Harami Hosanno. He said he heard that title, thought it would be a cool album title, which he's correct, it is. But there were a lot of people who pointed out there's a Joni Mitchell song called Harry's House on her 1975 album, The Hissing of Summer Lawns. And Harry is a really big Joni fan. He's been open about that. And why wouldn't he? Joni's a treasure. And she mentioned that she loved the title. So that's quite an endorsement right there. But that's not where it comes from.
No, it was cool to see her tweet that out as I was going through here. Just to backtrack a second where you were with him getting outside of listening to any artists in his general vicinity, or even so inspiration artists, and really just listening to new stuff, that sound translates. And to anybody who's listened to the podcast before, I've briefly talked about not having ever listened to this album coming into this, and not really, just knowing that he was in One Direction. Of course, Watermelon Sugar I've heard, but in all honesty, I didn't realize that was him. I didn't know who he was, and being outside of himself actually put me on my heels, because when I first listened to this, I was like, am I missing something? Like, is there a genre out here that is this happening on other people's albums? And as I looked, it wasn't, which was a neat thing too. Like, this is a very unique sound. And I have a little bit of love for the city pop, and know it more so out of my love for anime and just the Japanese culture. So you can feel it. It's neat. It was a cool sound. But yeah, it had me questioning if I was that much under a rock. Like, I'm already under the rock, not knowing who Harry Styles is or what his music is. But I thought I was missing a whole subgenre here, in popular culture. Thank God I wasn't.
It's interesting you mentioned coming into it so blind, because I have to say I am on the other side of this, because One Direction is my generation. When I was in high school, they were inescapable. I had classmates who were all about those boys. I wasn't even a huge fan of the band, but I can tell you their names. And they were pretty big. They sold out stadiums locally. They once played at our Ravens Stadium nearby.
Heard that.
It was not a joke. They were a big deal. You always saw them on award shows, heavily publicized. Harry admittedly got a bit more separate exposure for his love life, because he did date Taylor Swift briefly while he was in the band. And of course, that led to some press coverage. And we talked a bit about their relationship on the Midnights episode. And since then, I really didn't pay attention to him musically until I heard Watermelon Sugar and Adore You. And I thought, okay, this is actually really good. And just him in general, seeing him, it's like, wow, he's really different. I mean, just look at him and what he's wearing. It's like, this guy's different. I can get down with that. And so I've been paying attention since, and This one, the lead single got me really intrigued, and I was ready to get on board the train of Harry's House. I didn't quite explore the album as much as I would have because we started this podcast, but that's okay. It's good to be revisiting it now and just diving into what it's got to offer. And so with that being said, are you ready to dig into this bad boy?
I am. Let's do it.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
All right, so this album begins with a song called Music for a Sushi Restaurant. When I first saw the track list, I thought that's just going to be some quirky little instrumental intro. It's not. It's a full-fledged song, actually, and he was influenced by hearing one of his songs in a sushi restaurant, which is kind of awesome, not gonna lie. And yeah, it has a bit of a food as sex metaphor, which we've heard from him before, watermelon sugar. And really, this is a funky song. Like, the horns are blasting immediately. There's even a bit of scat singing, and it's off the wall, but somehow it all comes together very nicely. And this song was actually featured in an AirPods commercial this year, which definitely got it some more exposure, because those horns are selling it, you know?
They are indeed. It's a wild opening for an album. And I wanted to say this, but Music for a Sushi Restaurant, first listen through, I was convinced that he should have called this album Music for a Sushi Restaurant. Now, looking into it, I found out that they almost did, or they thought about it, you know, which is crazy. But it's a perfect title for this song in particular. Again, a wild opening for an album. The start of this, we talk about the Japanese roots with the city pop influence that he's going. It reminds me of a very, very Japanese video game soundtrack for the video game Katamari Damacy. And it is one of my favorites. So like right off the bat, it hit me with that. But then, you know, we've got that 8-9 second intro. Then at 25 seconds, we get those 80s power drums. And we, you know, they run us into this funky bass groove. And it starts to find itself in this city pop feel, like a hardcore, almost like a lo-fi city pop feel. But here we go to where you were. Those horns carry it right into a higher register for that real city pop feel, like this super fun feel. Last note I had on this, and you already touched on it, that scat, that scuba-dooba-doo-doo that he does in there is just, it's so unique and an awesome contrast to what's going on in the song that it stands out perfectly. It doesn't push it down your throat, but it's there and it catches your ear. And it's a very, very awesome piece of this composition. Yeah, I'll start off right here. Track 1 so far. This is a very well composed song, and that goes through this album.
So there we have it, a wild opener with Music for a Sushi Restaurant, and it can't completely continue to go down such a wild route because this is still pop music we're talking about. So our next track is Late Night Talking. This is a very R&B influenced kind of dance pop tune. It was the second single, a very obvious choice for that. This one I very quickly came to like on this album. I was like, no, I can dig this. It's just, you know, we've been doing all this late night talking. It's a sticky hook that you'll remember the first time you hear it. It just won't go away. And it's just a really solidly done pop song. And I don't think it's anything more or anything less, but I think sometimes that's just enough. But I do want to talk a bit about the video for this is off the wall. This is definitely somebody, his image is a lot more off the wall than his music. And in that regard only, he reminds me of early Lady Gaga.
Okay.
Because her videos could be so off the wall. And this one was pretty off the wall. He is waking up in bed and his bed has a portal to take him to different beds. He's like riding on a street laying in bed in his pajamas. It's different.
I like it.
Oh, the video for Music for a Sushi Restaurant, he's a merman in that one. That one's wild.
I heard that. That's one thing I didn't do is watch the videos, but I can imagine it, seeing the pictures and some of the stuff, you know, the way his look is on stage. I can see that. Yeah, man, late night talking. You're not kidding when you say an infectious hook. I mean, it's really right there. It's a super bright song, and it doesn't necessarily at first glance separate itself from the stylings of the first track, Music for a Sushi Restaurant. But that's a good thing for this track, in my opinion. It really keeps what we talk about pacing a lot, and we're only on second track, but they really feel cohesive in a package here. I've got a quote from Emma Swan from DIY, and she said, this is just half of her quote, but she said on this one, she felt that he wasn't scared of being secondary to the song, a lesson that it has taken many others far longer to learn. There's a couple times on this album, but this is for me the first time that I really felt it, and I love that because he really takes a duet seat with the main melody of the chorus, and I thought that was super unique. And it was like, from a music standpoint, it's very, very genius to sit there with an actual just straight melody singing next to you. I really love that. I got some real Morse Day and Prince synth hits throughout this that I love. That bam 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 bam. It really hits on that, and that hook right over top of it is on top, man. And the palette of sounds they use in this composition is just, it's a super tight composition. Again, number 2. This is a great pop song, like you said, and it doesn't need to do flashy extras. But there's layers of musicality on this one that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one as well. Definitely a great song, well-deserved single. Kind of wish it was a bigger hit. I feel like any idea of a single was overshadowed by the first single here.
I agree with you. For me, this should be a radio hit.
Yeah, but it still did quite well. It did well enough, certainly. So I guess that's what matters the most. So I'll take it. Track number 3 we are on to now, and this one is called Grape Juice. It's not about grape juice. That's a metaphor for wine. Because he ain't a kid anymore, folks. No more One Direction. This is a grown-up man, and this is a breakup song, I would say. It's him reflecting on a past love. It's very atmospheric, definitely gives you a summer vibe. I like the musicality on this song, and I like the concept he's going for. But to me, this song does feel a bit unfinished. It's under 3 minutes long. It kind of just goes by really quickly. It doesn't have a really strong hook. I just feel like it's an unfinished thought, and that it just needed to be drawn out more to be an actual song, more of an actual song. This one wasn't quite a highlight for me, and I wasn't surprised that he didn't include this one on the tour for the album. I did look at the set list. Most of these songs were done, not this one, and I can see why. If there's one to cut, it would be this one in my book.
Heard that. The shortness is definitely a note that I had, but for me, the shortness worked more so because I really took this as a super fun, simple love song to wine. And I thought that was so unique. I didn't really dive in and get any of the breakup aspect. I really saw his just love and for growing with wine. You know, at one point he's done with the whites and the pinks, and he does some really neat wine references throughout this syncopated song. You know, it's a very syncopated beat that encompasses all the parts of the composition, with the drums like just almost pounding with like this like stomp stage presence, this echoing. I don't even know how to describe the background bass drum, but it's very echoey. And then at 2:51, you have this synth outro that I really love too. It's a cool sound, and it hits that city pop vibe for me and keeps me right there as far as pacing. But yeah, I didn't mind the length on this one, more so because I took it as just a fun little romp with wine and done with.
Okay, different interpretations of the song then.
Which I love.
Thought it was something different, but that goes to show you that's a unique song if you can interpret it more than one way, I think. So That's what good songwriters do. So hats off to you on that one, Mr. Styles.
Most definitely.
And speaking of good songwriting, here's a song that connected with pretty much everyone this year, As It Was, the lead single from the album, and a record-breaking song. This was #1 for 15 weeks this year, not consecutively, but it just somehow kept managing to get back on top because it just wouldn't go away. And I don't fully love that because I don't think it gave Late Night Talking a chance to hit the top.
Heard.
And it did break a couple records that I'm not sure I'd put it above. I don't love that this was a week longer than I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston, but it's a different time. It's done differently now, so that's not really anyone's fault. It's just a different streaming world now.
Yeah, it is.
It's very different. To me, it bothers me because it's like, well, that's such a classic song, and this isn't quite that, but it's still awesome, though. Let's not kid ourselves here. It's been a bit overexposed, but don't get me wrong, this is a fantastic song. The lyrics are really depressing, but they are relatable. It's definitely a post-COVID song. I mean, in this world, it's just us. You know, it's not the same as it was, and that can strike a chord with anyone in any situation, not just in terms of the pandemic. You can apply it to any situation in your life. You can apply it to a breakup, a death, a divorce. Well, divorce and breakup are similar, but you get my drift. I think this can apply to anything. It's a real universal theme, but fortunately, the song's bouncy enough in its melody that it keeps it from getting too dreary. You can still dance around to this song, even though it's sad. And this one, it got a lot of comparisons to Blinding Lights, which I can kind of see, but it's a bit more minimalist than Blinding Lights, and I think more effective.
You got to be joking my ass on this one.
All the time I heard that.
I literally have in my notes that it hits similar to the sense of Blinding Lights. And I like that about it. I like that about it because it's up there. You're right. That poppiness is on purpose. And it adds an air of levity to the lyrics themselves. You want to talk about striking a chord automatically. Let me talk about what I think is genius right from the get on this track. We talk about Subconscious Listener all the time. We've got a kid's whisper into a literal 8-second sample of the hook, and then the song goes. I mean, you talk about genius. You've caught the automatic ear trying to hear the whispering kid, and then you just straight up give us the game over. You've already got 90% of listeners, and that is pure genius. I love that. You got that 80s synth pop feel. I go to that note on Blinding Lights too. It's automatically upbeat. This, for me, is the first time he's able to give us a little bit of the American/Western style feeling of music compared to the Japanese city pop sounds we've been hearing so far. So we start to hear this small shift into a more Western sound or a shared sound between city pop and Western. And I think that's where this song hits as well. We're on track 4 now, and the pacing is a gradual crescendo that's going on right now, and it's a natural one too that I actually adore over and over again as I listen and peel back these onion layers on Harry's House. This was a really neat track 4.
Oh yeah, and so actually the kid you hear at the beginning is his goddaughter.
That's awesome.
And there was, of course, a conspiracy created. They say, oh, that girl's the daughter of one of the Grammy producers, must be why he won.
Oh, get out of here.
Which, yeah, get out of here, really. Don't think that's the case, folks. But yeah, truly an awesome song that's already iconic. And I just want to say I love the video. I love seeing him dance around in his red jumpsuit.
That's this one?
Yeah, that's the video for this. And then, of course, the circular motions, and he's shirtless a good bit of it, which is admittedly nice to look at for me.
There you go. There you go.
Not going to complain about seeing Harry Styles in his underwear ever.
Get at it.
I mean, let's be real here. He's a sexy man.
He's a good looking boy. You know, he talks about Jagger, but he's got that Jagger for lack of better words, swagger about him. He definitely has that sensibility of a Mick Jagger that I can see in there.
He's definitely prettier than Jagger, though.
He is better looking than Jagger. Sorry, Mick. I'm talking
Mick, you're an icon and a legend. We won't take that from you, but Mick's just an awesome rock star. Harry Styles is a pretty boy. He always has been. That's part of the appeal.
I heard that.
But he's also a rock star now, which even better.
Here we go.
And yep, we rock out a little bit on our next song, track number 5, Daylight. And this is almost like Brit indie pop to me with those buzzed out guitars. Mm-hmm. It's totally the vibe I got from this one. This one, I have to say, after I think like several such dynamic tracks in a row, it kind of got lost in the shuffle on first listen for me. But the more and more you listen to it, it gets stuck to you. Stuck to your head. And I love the sound of it. I love the vibe of it. And again, I think this is a great example of him not overtaking the song. I mean, he sounds laid back singing this and lets the music do the talking and convey the intensity. And I think that's a really smart choice on his part. And I really like that about this song.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is another one of those examples when I go back to that quote earlier, and you said it again, he's not scared to let this song do its thing. This song has a beautifully mellow start, but even in my notes, again, I go back to that crescendo. It fits the crescendo of this album so far. And then at 105, you hit it right on the head with the British sounding indie pop. We get this super hit with wide open crash cymbals and then a quick strip away, which is really indicative of that genre because we go back to the narrative. It's so tight in composition and production. And then you get that return to the power hit again. But now the power hit comes back and these cymbals are open, but it fully incorporates the whole entire rest of the track. And that is, for me, that's pop music composition at its best. And then you strip that ending. When he hits the "If I Was a Bluebird," you strip away, and again, subconscious, you make us listen real quick. It's just two stanzas. It's him about the bluebird and then the honey, and it comes to that abrupt stop. And I think it's really well done in that aspect. Again, pacing. Here we go. We are on point, and we haven't had a misstep, in my opinion, as far as pacing or composition or production. It's been a nice ride up till track 5, killing it.
Yeah, we are definitely on a good point of this. A couple other things I want to mention about this song. First off, the fun part. I definitely recommend you check this out. Harry is pals with James Corden and has guested on his show several times. I know not everybody likes James Corden. I don't mind him too much, but I think some of it's just people think he's not a nice guy, but I don't know him personally. I can't comment on that. But there's a cool bit where they decided to make a music video for Daylight with a $300 budget.
Awesome.
And I got just them walking through the city, and they found an apartment to film it in.
Oh, and, I gotta check that.
It's pretty fun. It's a pretty fun bit. I enjoyed it quite a bit, actually. It was a lot of fun.
Sounds like it.
It turned out good, frankly. It turned out quite good. It was very well edited, I have to say. Despite that budget, still looked higher budget than videos with bigger budgets, I'm sure.
There you go. Tightly edited just fits this song even more because I really think this is some of the best composition production I've heard in a while.
Yeah. And the other one silly thing we have to mention is, of course, there's always the speculation sometimes of who's this about? And
I almost asked you.
Well, the first person a lot of fans thought of was Miss Taylor Swift, because she has a song called Daylight on her Lover album that sounds nothing like this. But Harry was asked if it was about her. He said no.
I wanted it to be about her. I'm not gonna lie.
I knew it wasn't about her just because of the reference of the woman doing cocaine in his kitchen.
Oh, heard.
I was kind of taken aback, but I was like, oh, we're talking about this on Harry's house. Okay. I was kind of like, not a great idea, lady, but you know what? I guess you're all rich. You're in your own world, but I knew that wasn't true because I don't know Miss Swift personally, of course, but I think Taylor Swift is far too disciplined to have ever even tried coke.
Who knows? But I just wanted this hopeless romantic, just knowing that was really the only relationship that I knew. So immediately I wanted this to be about it. It made sense to me. A couple of these, though, I wanted to be about Taylor, so maybe I'll get my wish by the end of the album.
Yeah, well, his most recent girlfriend was actually Olivia Wilde.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
And, well, that's just a shit show, frankly, but it's over now.
Okay, wow.
And he tends to go for ladies a bit older than him.
Okay.
But it was a very messy situation involving a movie and...
Olivia, I thought she was married to Jason Sudeikis.
Not anymore.
Wow, look at me, man. I'm showing my true living under a rock.
There was a bunch of silly drama with this movie they did and all that, and I'm not going to get into it because that takes us away from what's important here, which is the album. Forget Don't Worry, Darling. And I watched it. It's a stupid movie anyway, I thought.
Heard. No, don't take us away from the album, but
yeah, we're not going to. But yeah, wouldn't it be nice if it was about Taylor? I would have preferred that, but well, it's definitely not. I mean, Taylor's a drinker. That's what we get from her songs. She can drink.
Heard that.
That's her vice. I feel like that's pretty clear. So
there you go.
Anyway, we're going to move on to a song now that it probably isn't about either Taylor or Olivia Wilde. Little Freak. I feel like here he's feeling nostalgic for a previous relationship of some kind. And he's here admitting he should have done better. It's a very reflective song. And what I like about this song is that he is letting the walls come down just a bit. But there's also enough mystique there to keep you guessing. And I find that really interesting. And one of the people who suggested this album, they mentioned this song specifically. They were like, oh, Little Freak. I mean, what could that be about? That would be a great song to break down. It's like, you're not kidding. Then I was like, oh, yeah. I have my own guesses to who it's about. I came upon this interpretation recently. So his first known girlfriend, this is actually a pretty inappropriate relationship. When he was like 17, he was dating a woman 15 years older than him.
Heard.
And it was a British TV presenter named Caroline Flack. And I don't know many of the details about this relationship, but I did find out that actually in 2020, she committed suicide. And part of me wonders, like, is this maybe about her, maybe? Because I feel like that had to bring up something in him. Even if the woman was much older than him and he was a teenager, it's very inappropriate, of course. But I feel like that would have to bring up something in you to hear that your ex committed suicide.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I mean,
particularly during this pandemic.
Yeah.
When you're already reflecting on the past and to have this news come out.
Yeah, I think using the word mystique is so great with this one because it could possibly be about everybody. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This one, Little Freak, I'll go back musically on this one right now. It opens up with a heartbeat type beat. Okay. And for me, here we go, subconscious listener, that automatically denotes inside the body, the first sound we hear. And ultimately for these lyrics, this inner monologue that is going on here, he's speaking to himself, even though he's thinking back or thinking of the thought of the old fling, love, relationship, whatever it might be. Now, I really love the acoustic accompaniment behind because it hits perfectly in an almost dreamlike sense in the composition. But there's really a bit of growing inside these lyrics. And that's what I like, you know, from the start to the finish of the song, where you really get a grasp of him being like, you know what, I'm not worried about who, what, where. We're just really legitimately thinking about you. And I love that. Also, this track has one of my favorite bass players, Pino Palladino, on it, and just adds to the glory of this song. This retrospective, lyrically driven piece. I enjoyed this one.
Yes, and also fun little tidbit about this song, it was written in a hotel room in Tokyo.
Heard that.
So there you go.
Hotel rooms have a way of making you think about the past. They just do.
Yeah. And speaking of thinking about the past, that reaches its peak on our next song here, which is the end of side 1 of this album. And he mentioned that that was intentional. He knew this song had to end side 1 because he's thinking of how albums are made like that. That's clearly how he's structuring this, I feel like.
Of course, on this album. I didn't touch Little Freak because I'm going to talk on this track about a point that I wanted to make, but yeah, structure is huge on this so far. I'm so glad to hear you say that he said that, like he's thinking of this as an album, because it's so far so perfectly put together that I couldn't see how you wouldn't be.
Yeah, anybody who's interested at all in Harry Styles and his process, definitely go to YouTube, watch his interview with Zane Lowe, the Harry's House interview. There's 2 of them, but it really gives you a look into how he thinks and his process, and he really puts out some nice tidbits about this album, and you learn a lot about it. And it was especially helpful for me to watch this interview because he did shed some light on this next song, which we're building up to. I'm going to say what it is now, though, I promise. It's called Matilda, and it is a spare acoustic ballad, and this was a song that Zane Lowe asked about. And Harry said that it was about the experience of a friend of his, not him. And that the idea of it is kind of to say, like, this person, you get to know them and they might over time reveal some things to you and you'll think, oh, well, that's just not right. And you don't really think it's your place to barge in, but it is important to listen. And he's saying this song is kind of just about, like, I was listening to you, but instead of coming up front with who this person is, he takes a fictional character from a Roald Dahl book of the same name and frames it as being about this character who was really misunderstood.
Wow.
And just what a great idea. And I think it's a really beautiful how he sings from another perspective here. And this one really reminds me of, to mention her again, Taylor Swift. She did that really brilliantly on her pandemic product albums, Folklore and Evermore, singing from different perspectives. It's so powerful at times and just really well done here. It's a beautiful song. But Harry did make a point of saying this song is really for everybody. It's for anybody who's ever felt misunderstood. And I think that's really beautiful. And again, I like that he's creating that mystique over who is Matilda.
You're blowing my mind on so many levels. I'm a little bit taken aback. The actual Matilda fictional reference I didn't get, and I can't wait to go back and explore that one. I go immediately, we're in now a pronounced acoustic. Okay, we were in a dreamlike acoustic before, and now we've moved into this pronounced acoustic, and it's automatically telling me that we're speaking outward to somebody, this pronounced music rather than this inside thought. And that's immediate here with Matilda. He's talking out loud to a specific person or about a specific person. For me, in my opinion, and especially in my first listen through, but regardless, not knowing him, this one is a showcase of his vocal ability that I haven't necessarily seen to this level before on this album. You know, this was his vocal ability stands out. It doesn't necessarily stand alone, but it stands out in the forefront of this, and I really enjoyed that. This was the first one that really hit a Paul Simon feel from the delivery of the tempo of the lyrics against the melody of the song, and I really dug that. I love the composition on this. I really like that the composition on this realizes itself as a piano piece by the end of the song, and you don't, unless you're really hardcore listening, you don't even hear the transition from that acoustic to just the piano. And I love that evolution of this song by the end that matches the narrative. This one was in the 7 spot, end of the first side. Now that I know that, just a really perfect placement and a really well done song.
I agree. And before we move on, I'm going to put in my 2 cents about who I think Matilda is. After some research, there have been a few different theories among his fan base as to who Matilda could be. But there was one that I found especially intriguing. This person is not a romantic partner. It's not even a woman. There is a pretty widely reported theory that this song is actually about one of his former One Direction bandmates. Zayn Malik, and some of the interpretation I think might have been a bit too extreme, because sometimes people with this, they try to connect a song that artist did with what he did. I don't think that's what was going through his head when he wrote this song. I don't think it was written as a response to another song. I feel like that's pretty obvious if that's being done. You know what I mean?
Most definitely.
I don't think this was written as a response, but this bandmate of his, Zayn Malik, he's definitely had some troubles, and it sounds like his time in the band was pretty rough. He actually left One Direction in the middle of what ended up being their final tour.
Okay.
And that's pretty wild to do. And in the song, he's kind of saying to this person, you did what you had to do for you. And even though Zayn kind of broke up the band and changed everything for them, he felt he had to do it. And Zayn's had some other issues, it sounds like. Apparently, he suffered from an eating disorder while he was in the band. He was also the only non-white member. He is a Muslim, not practicing currently, he stated, but that definitely is going to create a bit of a different dynamic, unfortunately, amongst fans of the band. I think he was subject to some real Islamophobia, which is terrible. And he just felt like an outsider in this band, it sounds like. And he now says he wasn't really friends with Harry or any of the band. And who knows? We weren't there. We can't comment on that. And some people believe that they were a couple. I don't know if I believe that. But, you know, it's just, I think that's a very interesting interpretation. And really, a bandmate's somebody you spend a lot of time with. I mean, these boys spent 5 to 6 years together, almost nonstop working. So they got to know each other well, whether they were good friends or not.
You're blowing my mind with that too. And I'm scanning through the lyrics as I'm listening to you. And I mean, just another layer to peel back, but you can see where that makes sense. You can see where that comes in. That's a really cool interpretation of this one. I'd love to hear Harry ask that question. I'd love to hear what he would have to say, or just to hear him realizing that that's an interpretation out there and reflecting on that. That'd be a neat thing to be a fly on the wall in that room.
Yeah, possibly. But honestly, it's one of those things, I bet you years from now, when he writes a tell-all memoir, he'll finally reveal who Matilda was. It's
there you go.
One of those things I think is going to happen.
There you go.
But for right now, I think he wants to keep the mystique up and possibly protect someone's privacy.
Heard that.
And that would be a smart thing to do, I think, because even Harry's had his privacy invaded quite a bit, I've seen. So I think that's very important to him, and I can respect that, certainly.
It doesn't seem like he's a muckraker, a shit talker, you know? It doesn't seem like he's stirring too many pots. I don't know a lot about him, but from what I've read and from what we've talked about so far, it doesn't seem like he's a big pot stirrer.
Well, his public persona, his mantra is treat people with kindness.
Hey, that's how I live. So
yeah,
that's the shit.
Definitely not a pot stirrer unless people want to make him out to be. And honestly, I'm just actually going to make a point not related to the album, but one that I really think is important to make.
Spill that tea.
Yes. So there's a lot of speculation out there about Harry Styles' sexual orientation. It's like, is he gay? Is he bi? Are these relationships real or not? Like with Olivia Wilde or whatever. And there's a couple conspiracies that he has had long-term romantic partnerships with his former bandmates. Some of this stuff really is going into the space of conspiracy. Sure. And there's all these people out there who, like, there's folks who've accused Harry Styles of queer baiting by doing things like dressing femininely or waving a pride flag at his show, yet not being an out LGBT artist. And I just want to say this right now. If these fans of his, not just the media, fans of his, are creating conspiracies about his love life and how he may or may not be married to one of his former bandmates, this man doesn't owe it to anybody to reveal his sexual orientation or dating life. He doesn't owe that to anybody. He keeps it private, and knowing how crazy these fans are, I think that's the right decision. And I think he's at the very least supportive of the LGBTQ community, which I think is a wonderful thing for him to do. And just leave this man alone. That's my point. I know he's got way more money than I'll ever have, but I just want to say that I think you need to lay off of that one because, I mean, if we were in his position, we'd probably want to be pretty quiet about our love lives too. That's all I'm saying.
Regardless, as a fan, if you want to call yourself a fan, and I'll just put my 2 cents in on this, you don't need to do that. And if you were a fan, I mean, just from me looking in, we talked about it earlier tonight, his sensibilities as far as being fashion forward and really trying to challenge the gender roles inside of fashion. Like you saw his inspirations, his self-proclaimed inspirations like Bowie or even Jagger. You know, we keep going back to Jagger, but, you know, those sensibilities are just part of that rock star life regardless. It doesn't matter. You want to talk about his mantra of treating with kindness. If they're fans, they should be able to hopefully latch on to that and take inspiration from it and not even have that inside of the love of this art, man, this unique art. Yeah. I go back to a shame on them as far as fans go, but I take that word very, very heavily, very seriously. If you're going to say you're a fan, why would you make conspiracies about this and that? Just love it. Yeah. Talk about it. Enjoy it. I mean, talk about it in a round table setting, but don't make it a thing. Don't make it a thing, people.
Yeah. And fortunately, these aren't the most harmful conspiracies out there, but when you're going to these lengths, we're not that far off from going into like QAnon territory, and that's really terrifying. And
silly stuff. It's
silly, and just get a grip and leave this man alone with your stupid conspiracies. I'm sure he's aware of it.
Nerd.
He just doesn't acknowledge it, and he shouldn't because it's foolishness. But I wanted to make a point about it, and that's why I did that. Now we're going to flip it over and talk about the album again with our next song, beginning of side 2, track number 8, Cinema. One of our more up-tempo songs. He came up with this on the treadmill, he said. And this features Mr. John Mayer on guitar. And it's a very funk pop kind of song. That's really the vibe that he's going for here. And there's 2 different parts to the song. It has more of a hook in the first part. It's kind of like, I dig your cinema, 'cause I'm so into ya. And then we get into the second part, which is more funky, has a bit more vocal ad-libs and repetition of certain lyrics again and again. I'm going to say right now, I think the first part of this song is much better than the second. So at first, when I heard the album, this song didn't really stick out to me, but another podcast I listened to called Song versus Song was having an episode with a Harry Styles song from this album. They were talking about As It Was, and that led to discussion of the album itself. And one of the hosts of the show mentioned that they thought this song was gross. And I hadn't thought about this song in a while, and listening to it now, yes, I agree, it is disgusting, absolutely. That second part of the song, you pop when we get intimate, that is disgusting. It makes my skin crawl. I mean, Harry, you are lucky that you are a good-looking man, because that is not a good pickup line, mister. Not a good pickup line. I have to agree with that. You pop. I don't like it.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Let me start from the start of this song. One, I immediately, as soon as this song hit, remembered that you told me John Mayer was on this album. I could hear him. I could hear him in the background. I could feel him sneaking through with his style. It adds a layer of cool to this composition. I'm gonna curse. Let me hold back.
I don't care.
I fucking love the use of the word cinema as meaning like the coolness. I love it, man. We look at the real definition, and it's, one of the definitions, the production of movies as an art, but like using cinema as the adjective embodying your coolness. I love that. I think it's super cool. I thought it was an insanely cool way of describing someone's swagger. I dig your cinema. I'm gonna start using that shit. I'm not even gonna lie, Harry. I'm stealing that from you. I dig your cinema, Harry, for this, and I dig the cinema of this track. When the floor falls out on this at 2:34 and Mayer starts riffing, and the track comes back in, I love it, man. It builds up like like a Daft Punk build. I dig it, man. I love the screaming of the word cinema behind the repetition, and it's constantly building all the way through here. For me, I almost first listen, I was convinced that this should have faded out and not had an abrupt stop. But as far as pacing goes for this album, it wouldn't have worked into the next song. I don't know about. Maybe I got to go back and look. I'm trying to scan through it now. I mean, that's only one time that he says that. He's talking about bringing the pop. I don't know. I didn't get that vibe.
That's gross too. Honestly, I think you bring the pop. Okay, I interpreted this a bit different. I don't think this is how he wrote it.
Heard.
But the way he's talking about like the cinema, for some reason, it kind of makes me think of like voyeurism.
Oh, see, I didn't. Again, we talk about the beauty of this art and the way it makes different people look into it. I really took that cinema as the coolness. So when I watch wrestling, for instance, when they get an ovation or a crowd behind them, they call that the pop. They look for that pop, and that's the way it referenced in my brain of like, you bring the crowd happiness, you bring the happiness period to what we got going on here. As far as the way the pop went, I didn't get the dirtiness of it, but I dig this track. I dig this track. It's got a funky swagger to it, and John Mayer, but I like this one.
We are not on the same page. I think it's disgusting.
I'm super surprised by that, but I am not the
only one who thinks it's disgusting. So you know what?
I don't know, man. Maybe,
Up to the cinema is disgusting. No.
What if they were talking about soda?
No, that is not what they're talking about.
No, I'm just playing devil's advocate on that one, but I didn't.
He's not.
Beauty of the art. Beauty of the art.
Hey, it's okay to sing about sex. Watermelon sugar's not about fruit.
I mean, yeah.
But this is just not it for me. It is funky, but ugh.
Heard that.
But fortunately, I think we get to a better point with our next song, Daydreaming. This song features a sample of Ain't We Funkin' Now by the Brothers Johnson. So we're going back to the 70s there. And Mayer's featured on this one again. This one was one I immediately loved. I love the use of the sample, first of all. I think it's brilliantly done. And I don't think this is full on that kind of funk. I think it's a bit like funk light, if that makes sense. But I think it works for this album. I think the funk for this, like, I don't need them to go full, Brothers Johnson on me. Like, that's full on funkiness. Like, I don't need you to go into that whole, like, I'm not listening to, like, Rick James or Prince or whoever you want to mention here. That's not what it is. And I think that you have to lighten it down and make it not so aggressively funk if you're going to have it on this album. And I think that the two styles are synthesized very well, which I really appreciate. And I will say this vocally, this is my favorite song of his on the album because I really enjoy those funky ad-libs he's getting in there. And he's not the most natural at it. I'm just going to say it, but that's understandable. He's not a funk performer. I don't expect him to go there with this. But he's getting really into it, and it does add to the song. And I love the spirit behind it, and this is not like something that he did before, and this was a risk for him. Very different, and I really think that it paid off, and I don't think this is one of the songs often cited as a highlight of the album, and I think that's just bonkers, because this is definitely a highlight. I loved this first listen, and I still do love it. This is definitely one of the best he's done, and I want him to do more songs like this in the future. I'll say that now.
I heard that. I mean, for me, this is first listen, the full realization of that Western sound, that funk mixed with that city pop, and to boom, here we go. You talked about it, genius. That Brothers Johnson sample, you're right, it's not full Brothers Johnson, because if it was, it wouldn't have fit this album in any right. Now, you can't go full Brothers Johnson in the middle of a Harry Styles, in the middle of this album, period. But that speaks to the genius of the way that this sample was handled, and you hit that right on the head. I do love, this is another one where I feel like he lets the song duet with him, and I love that. And he's got these awesome, it's just another track where he lets it really star with him, and you get that he does a lot of the track over dub harmony, and they're nuggets, man, like pure gold harmony nuggets that he's sticking in there. Those ad libs too, it really has. And you spoke to the spirit of the song. I'm right there with you. It really has this daydream feel to me, because it repeats itself over and over in such a short time, but it evolves and it adds on top and it adds on top and it adds on top. And then finally, it finds its thought and it trails off with this consolidated piano version of its main theme. And I love that. I think it is just naturally a beautiful song. I say composition so much, but it's composed so well. It's just a solid song. It totally deserves much more love. It's surprising that it's not one of, I won't even go singles. I'm just saying one of the highly regarded tracks on the album. It's another one where Pino Palladino is in there on that bass too. So I get some extra love there. But that sample is a match made in heaven, and it performs so well together with his sound here. What a track. I can't say it enough. I love this track.
I would love to see a video for this. I want it to be a single just so they can make a video for it.
Nerd.
That's all I'm asking. And crazy thing about this song, Harry said that his producer, Tyler Johnson, sent it to him in a voicemail.
Wow, I heard that.
That's how this started, and just what a banger. What a great song. Definitely one of my favorite tracks of 2022. Easily.
I love hearing the places and the ways that these inspirations, these tracks are coming through. It really speaks to him as an on the go. You said it earlier in the podcast, but a traveling performer. Like, he's just always making music. It seems like treadmill, hotel room, voicemail message. I mean, you really get a sense of that traveling musician. I dig it.
Yes, right there with you. And, well, what better to describe a traveling musician than our next song? Perfect transition. Track number 10, Keep Driving. I think this is one of two slice of life songs on the album, much like Grape Juice, but I like this one a lot better. This is one, it's very short. It's 2 minutes and 20 seconds, but once you hear it a couple of times, it'll stick with you. Try getting rid of that hook. And it's very stream of consciousness, these lyrics. And I think at times that can be sloppy, but I think it works well with the point of this song. It's like, the world is chaotic. Are we going to stop, or are we just going to just keep going? Are we going to keep driving? And I think that's a really cool point to make. And even though it's, in a way, it's kind of an interlude, but I think it's really effective. And there's one line in the song, I looked into this. I think this is hilarious. So there's one part of the song, there's a line, cocaine side boob, backseat with a rear view. And he performed this in front of his mother, and he was embarrassed, of course, which I would have been, but at his concerts, it's so funny. He has his fans sing this line. He doesn't sing it. The whole crowd sings this line, and it's hilarious.
Oh, that's great. That's especially with the embarrassment of mom. I wonder if mom had a little piece in that after the first time hearing it, like, and he's like, all right, I'll let the crowd sing it.
I think that was a smart move, because look, Harry loves his mom. How nice. But Yeah, I have to say, though, this man, he's a great performer. Just look at any of his videos. This man has incredible energy when he performs, and he knows how to work a crowd. And I am definitely going to be wanting to go to the next tour, whatever it is. I will be up in that. I really want to go because I would have gone to this one if it were a bit closer by, but I decided I don't think I'm dedicated enough to go to New York for him yet. But I'm definitely going to be paying attention for the next go round and to see whatever else he comes up with after this. So, but we're not there yet. We're still on this album. So now we're at track number 11, which is Satellite. Definitely about a long distance relationship. And this could be about any of his relationships. When you're a traveling man like Mr. Harry, you're bound to have some long distance going on. So this could be about all of them. Who knows? Maybe it's an amalgamation of relationships. But, yeah, I mean, the best part of this song, I just love how it builds. Because it starts off like it's going to be kind of slow and dreamy, but it just builds into this pretty cool climax. And we kind of really go there towards the end. And it's not full on to the extent that it would be distracting on this album once again. But they make it work for this album, which I think is so smart. Because he's not going to go completely off like the Stones or Bowie would in this case. But it wouldn't make sense for him to do that.
No, it wouldn't make sense, but it just adds to the pacing of this album. You know, Keep Driving kept us driving through, even though it was short. And we hit here and we're like, you said it, you start off very slow and you're like, not sure where this is going to go. But this track, how it builds, love is an understatement for me as well on how it builds. By 2 minutes and 35 seconds, this track is hitting so hard and really just taking advantage of that live drum sound again that we are a little bit before on this album, but just pounding over top of those synths. Even the dreamlike vocals and effects, I think, speak to the sensibility of him as a musician, as just a composer, thinking of different ways that it can be interpreted, and just add this outer space sort of feel to the satellite thought of the title. But this song, man, it grows, and you're right, it almost feels like it's going to grow too much, and it doesn't. It hits correct, and it really sets this crescendo high to go into the next song and have us listen hard because of the way it works with the next track.
Yes. And speaking of the next track, we're going to go there. It's our probably most spare acoustic song here, possibly, Boyfriends, with some lovely harmonies. It's about how men are trash. He said so much when describing the song. And Ben Harper played on this song, which made him very happy. He said it was just about relationships he's seen go wrong. So this time, again, he's looking as an observer, not as a participant, which I think is interesting. And this was actually recorded first during the final sessions for the previous album, Fine Line. But they figured we need to work with this a bit more and use it for this one. I think this is one where he has some pretty good observations. I do think there are better songs of this type, if that makes sense. I think it's well done for what it is. And it did grow on me quite a bit during the course of this listen. But I think that, again, it's just, I've heard songs like this before, better examples of it. And I think he could do an even better variation on this in the future, I think. Because I really do think that in a lot of ways, I haven't talked a lot about the lyrics on this album because there's so much else to talk about, fortunately, but I really do think in a lot of ways he's still growing as a writer a lot, which is understandable. You started off in a band where you didn't get to write your songs, and when you did, you're credited with like 10 other people at times. That's a lot. And so I think he's still really growing into writing to an extent, not that he's more than proficient here, of course, but I just think this is an example of there's still some work. It's still a work in progress, and that's what art should be. We should never just rest on our laurels, and I don't think he will, but that's my thought on Boyfriends.
Yeah, I'm with you there. There is definitely a sophomoric feel in his writing here. You can tell that he's growing. It's a beautifully, I mean, Ben Harper lays it down on this song. Beautiful, beautiful song. And right here in the penultimate track, the flow is correct. It really brings me down to a calm vibe, even though it's not necessarily the most calming lyrically, as far as the negative, not, you know what I'm saying, like the negative stance on the boyfriends, on the guys, but it definitely sonically brings me to where I think a listener should be at this point on this album. It doesn't rest on his laurels, and I hope he doesn't rest on his laurels. It's a solid track.
Yes, but I'm gonna say this now. A few of these songs have been covered already, of course, but there was one cover I wanted to talk about, and it is of this song. So this actually got a group to record for the first time in 10 years. An early 90s trio, you might know them, Wilson Phillips. They did a cover of this, which this was a natural choice considering the harmonies, and they said they really liked the song and felt that he wrote a great one and that they could relate to it because they've seen a lot. And I mean, I'm going to say it now, their version's better than this one, in my opinion. It's maybe not quite as well produced, but those ladies can sing.
Yeah,
and
I mean, those girls.
Yeah, and they have I mean, at this point in time, obviously they're all moms and married and all that now, but that you can hear the wisdom in their voices when they hear this song, when they sing this song, I should say, and you can't beat that. And that's why I love that cover so much. And I mean, obviously Harry gave them decent enough material to work with, but they elevated it. And I wouldn't have been mad if Harry just said, you know what, it's your song. I'm not going to do it. It's your song, Wilson Phillips, because you deserve it. You did it. And I know not all the teeny bopper fans are going to go listen to that version, but I think everyone should, because again, those ladies can sing.
They most definitely should. You expect one thing from Wilson Phillips, and that's those spot on harmonies. The almost you don't expect sometimes how beautiful they can harmonize. They hit notes that I wouldn't even think to add into these harmonies, and I've always loved that from them. But I'm so glad you said it. That wisdom, maybe it's just the timbre, and it's not just the timbre, but that wisdom shines through in their cover. Their cover is it's immaculate. Now, production wise, you're right. If they could get that produced just a tad bit better, you're right. He should hand it over and say, you know what, you guys got this. And wow, it almost, if you played them next to each other to someone who hadn't heard either, I think you'd be hard pressed to find people who thought that song was written by Harry Styles and not written for or by Wilson Phillips.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's that strong of a cover for sure. Yeah, and it is. That's what great singers do, folks.
Heard.
That's what great singers do. And now we've gotten to the end of the album. Wow. Crazy. What a journey we've been on already. This song is called Love of My Life. It's not a Queen cover. That's the first thing I think of is the Queen song, Love of My Life, but not at all that. Harry said that this song is actually about his home country of England. And he's not always there because he's a traveling rock star, but it's always in his heart. And that's why he's saying it's the love of his life. And just like England is home to him. And I think it's a really appropriate closer for the album because it is about home. But I have to say the sound of this, I know this album came out before Midnight's, but it sounds like a Midnight song to me.
I can see it there.
It really does to me. And it is a bit different from everything else here. Like those heavy synths like gave me kind of just vibes from that album, but I really enjoyed them. And the other reason that I think this is such a good closer is because it is a different sound from everything else here. It is a bit heavier, and it leaves you with that great question of what's next. And I think that's a great album closer for when you're awaiting a follow-up. That's a perfect way to close an album. They're going to leave me wondering, what are they going to do next? What will this next move be? Like, will there be a real sonic evolution? Like, it makes me very curious, and I think that's a great album closer.
I'm with you on that. This is a different sound, closes out the album so tightly. I love the way it fades into this track, especially because this track off the cut coming in from the fade in, like you said, is driven by these heavy bass chords. And it, for me, I like it because when the drum starts to pick up behind it, for me, it feels like he's starting to walk away, or now knowing it's about his hometown, even more so just grow as this track goes through. And I've said this throughout this album. I hear it a lot inside of his tracks per se, but also in the album, this just evolution and this growth, especially in this track when the beat starts to pick up. By 2 minutes, it's on this walking drum that for me hit me right on the 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover for a second, and I dug that too. And you're right, sonically, this is that what do you do next, what's coming next ender to an album. And then on top of that, I like, and maybe it's just me, he ends this track with this dream style piano that's so right composition wise, because in my opinion, it's that final piece that pays homage and wraps this package with a tight city pop bow at the end of it. Again, it's really reminiscent of some anime / Japanese stylings as far as city pop or just Japanese influenced music at that level goes to. So I think that was such a fitting ending. But what an ender. 13 tracks, and that's how you end it. You've done well. I can't find a hiccup in pacing, period, in this song. I'm sorry, in this album, period. Maybe that's just me, but really great way to end it.
I agree. The pacing of the album is pretty spot on. Must say that. Definitely agree with you on that. And now we've come to the end, and the question, what is your grade for the album?
Harry's House. At first listen, for me, it seemed like it was going to be a monotone walk through this album. And I was so pleasantly surprised. Actually, I was amazed at the layers of sound and feeling that he was able to put on this album. Even in a sophomoric type of feeling, as we said, of him growing and me not having a real knowledge of him, but feeling that, it just really sang to me. It was paced, again, I'm going to say it was paced to perfection. I feel like it was produced with meticulous precision. And it still has me going back through it and bouncing around to musical intricacies that I hadn't heard. And I've listened to this album at least 13, 14 times now. And I still find stuff in there that I haven't rewound an album like this, like 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds rewinds in a long time. I've been picking this album apart. And I really, it's a stellar outing, and one that has made me really respect him as an artist. For this, I'm going to give it an A. I'm going to do a hot tea take right here.
Okay.
We did Renaissance, and it was up to against them on this one. I would never in a million years want to be the one that made the choice of best album between these two, because there are some really, really fine points on both. And as far as full entire albums for this category, it's a very tough choice. But yeah, an A for me, and a new Harry Styles fan, especially if this is what he's going to give me. Solid album. I thought I was going to get teeny bopper bullshit. I'm not going to lie. And it was really an awesome listen.
All right. going to give it a B plus. And I agree with you. There's a lot of great musical intricacy stuff here. The points for me are being taken off because of, again, the somewhat sophomoric lyrics, and music can make up for that. I'm not going to say that, but because he's going for this singer-songwriter vibe, I think it's very important if you want to tell stories that your lyrics are there. That's just my opinion on it. And he's looking to a high bar of inspiration, too. If you're looking to a Joni Mitchell or a Stevie Nicks, you're looking that. And not everybody can be them. Of course, I'm not saying he should be them or try to be them. And my thing is, there are moments here when he absolutely nails it on the head. As it was, Matilda, what beautiful stories, pure singer-songwriter greatness right there. There are other songs here, however, and there's songs that I like. There's those kind of sophomoric lyrics, and I take the points off because I do think he can do just a bit better. And that's why I'm very curious to see where he goes next, because I still think there's a work in progress here. And Pitchfork, in their review of the album, this isn't an exact quote, but they made a very good point. Like, there's not always substance, but style always abounds. And I have to agree with that quote. But I do really like the album. And in terms of the comparison to Beyonce, I'm not as worried about her lyrics because she was going for a very different concept than he was. The concept was to make a dance album, and it's a brilliant dance album. I graded it A- on my usual metrics, but no, it's an A. I was lying to myself. That's just based on usual metrics. As a complete, it's an A. And it is a hard decision. These are both beautiful albums. I still would give it to Renaissance, but I think that was just more my cup of tea. And I just loved what she did there. And I really am looking forward to see what Harry does next after this.
I share your curiosity, and I really applaud you for being able to take a step back on an artist there and say, you know what, you got more in you, and I know it's there. Kudos to you. I take inspiration in that thought, Charlie. So thank you for that one. That's a really awesome way to look at that at any artist. So thank you for that one.
Yeah, that's just how I choose to look at it. And I mean, I have my personal ideas of what I think I'd like to see. Like people I think he could collaborate with. These guys are great. Don't get rid of them. But Harry, you can collaborate with whoever you want now.
Yeah, have fun, man. The world is your oyster.
And there are some great people out there who I am sure they're icons that we've discussed on this podcast. Some of them, the people I'm thinking, if you want to go in those directions, go for it. If you want to go more funk R&B, call Timbaland, call Danger, call them.
Heard that.
If you want to call Jack Antonoff, frankly, that's who I want to see him work with most of all.
I'm gonna fucking go see a Harry Styles shows. I think that's crazy to me, but
I'd love to go to one of his shows. We will definitely be at the next tour.
I'm down with that. Kudos to you, Harry. Kudos to you, Mr. Styles. You have a new fan in me. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, definitely. And this is the one that I would say made me a fan. And Harry's definitely someone I've been following for the past year now. And there's nobody else actually currently in music who I am more curious to see what they're going to do next. No one else.
And speaking of what they're going to do next, let's talk about what we're going to do next this month.
Yes. So this was Cory's idea, actually. We were going to do something a bit different, but we decided to actually base this month off of this album. It's going to be Harry's House Month because there's just so many places this album goes.
Yep.
And so many points we can go back to with Mr. Styles that we're going to have a whole month of albums somewhat connected to this album in some way. And with that being said, our first album that we will be covering is by a woman who Harry has called his main musical and fashion inspiration. And it's probably not somebody you would expect, but she is important to him, and she performed with him at Coachella. So she is a significant part of the story. It's a woman who's always welcome at Harry's house, I'm sure. The one and only Shania Twain. And we will be discussing her legendary 1997 album, Come On Over. Still one of the top 10 highest selling albums ever. So a lofty undertaking for us, because again, there's nobody who doesn't know at least half the songs on the album, I think. But one that I'm really looking forward to, very much so. It's going to be a really fun one, and a bit lighter of a listen than this one at times, but that's a good thing. I'm really looking forward to it, but I just realized something. We did not share our favorite tracks on the album.
Oh, well, what's yours? Because I already know mine.
I gotta go with the obvious, even though it was overplayed as it was. Just what a brilliant song right there.
As it was, heard.
I gotta go with it.
I feel you. I gotta go Daydreaming.
That's up there too.
I love that track so much. I can't believe it's not a single. I tried to not say that earlier, but like, man, everybody listen. Hopefully you listen to this whole album. But yes, have fun listening to
Daydream. Yeah. Come on. And make a video. Make a video, Harry.
Brothers Johnson.
Yes.
Yeah, and I hope everybody gets a chance to really enjoy this month with us inside of this Harry's House motif, whether it be 40 degrees of separation, whether it be inspirations that he's come forth and said. It's going to be neat to really spill throughout this month. And we talked about that curiosity, but we came up with this idea before we even really had this talk right here and talked about that curiosity. So there's going to be some interesting stuff going on this month. I'm super excited about this.
Yes, most definitely. And in the meantime, while we are waiting for that, you can follow us on social media at Turntables and Tea Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and also subscribe wherever you're listening to us, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Audible. We're on all of them. And we appreciate the support. And until then, we're going to wait for you all to come on over to our next episode.
Peace.